Hello everyone. This video I'm hoping will be just a way I can quickly touch base with everybody about the expectations that I'll have for this next week. And it's not really just this next week. I'm actually going to give you a few things to submit that will cover a 7-day period. So you can begin that today, you can begin that tomorrow. But within the next couple of weeks, few weeks, that's when I'll be kind of looking for them to be coming in. The last 2 weeks lessons have gone over skills of self-observation and skills of self-regulation, and those two groups of skills taken together is what I'm considering to be the skills of self-awareness. So just to be pretty specific, that's kind of a way of knowing yourself and then doing something to soothe yourself or to improve yourself even. Those two things. So a word about self-awareness. Like why would I even bring that up in a class about communication and interaction? Maybe some of you have wondered that this last couple of weeks, like why are we talking about mindfulness and stuff like that? So it's worth considering that when we try to learn how to communicate skillfully or effectively, we should be as aware of ourselves as possible. This is something that maybe we're often told to do, to kind of, well, what do you think? What are you feeling? Pay attention to how those things, how you think and feel as you interact with people. But it's pretty rare, at least in my experience, that we're taught how to do that, how to be self-aware. And what we've gone over are some really specific ways to have a sense of awareness, that is, of what we observe in ourselves and our thoughts and emotions, and also as we act or respond to others. So I've put on one of the slides of the PowerPoint for this lesson something I think that's pretty useful to consider. And that is that as we communicate with others, we really only have a narrowed window of control over things that we can actually control ourselves. We can influence a lot, but direct control, we really only have that with a few things. And arguably those things are what we say and do in response to what we see around us, what we say and do in response to what we hear around us, what we say and do in response to what we think within ourselves, and what we say and do in response to what we feel within ourselves. So you can notice that within each of those phrases, the word response is what is the narrow window there. Okay, what we observe around us and within us, what we see and hear around us, what we think and feel within us, we have choices to respond to those things, even to our own thoughts and our own emotions. And as we learn how to do that skillfully and quickly, then we are deepening our sense of self-awareness, and that is the awareness of what goes on, what we observe, and the awareness as we respond to those things that we observe. I also think it's worth pointing out that this is the way we actually influence relationships that we're a part of. This doesn't mean that we control or manipulate or completely guide the relationships, but we influence the direction that they take based on our own self-work. And that's kind of a good news, bad news, because one might feel a little bit of tension or fear that, oh, well, I can't control what's happening in this situation. And that's, for the most part, accurate. But the good news part of that is that all you have to control is what you respond, how you respond to what happens around you and within you. And if you do that the best you can, then it tends to lead to better results, even if others aren't doing that skillfully. So that's just something to consider. And I also have a little bit of a disclaimer just to remind everyone that these are, a lot of these ideas, most of these ideas are not things that I've created. They're just things that I've either been trained with or studied on myself. So it's worth pointing out. So if you want more information, there are lots of resources for any of these things. So I'm not going to review in all the subtle details about self-observation, self-regulation skills. I've just put them on a couple of subsequent slides just to have as a resource for you to touch base on. In the past, when I've taught this course, the self-observation skills, the mindful awareness practice of see, hear, feel, has been a little bit of a challenge for some, and that's actually that's pretty common. The first phase of learning anything new requires a little bit of kind of guesswork and confusion and a little groping around with it to get used to it, getting your sea legs with it, as it were. And that's true for this as well. You're learning you're strengthening skills in new ways, skills of your attention, qualities of your attention, that will require a little bit of effort to kind of get used to or get the hang of. So in the 7-day period that I'm going to ask you to submit some things, I'm going to ask you to really commit an experimental effort toward this practice amidst other things. And I would be happy to clarify any points about it. The instructions I think I've kind of outlined in a couple of other places, but just really quickly, in a nutshell, the practice itself is a mindfulness exercise. And as you're sitting still, that's part of what the technique kind of requires, just to find a space where you can be still and quiet and reasonably undisturbed. Simply allow or notice where your attention is pulled without you having to guide it in any direction. I might notice a bird flew by the window and it just kind of grabbed my attention. That'd be an example of what I mean by letting your attention be pulled. And the actual exercise, how you're strengthening those skills, is every few moments you simply notice where your attention is, what's pulling it. And sometimes it'll be outward, like to a sight or to a sound I might hear, or to a physical feeling sensation in the body, like my feet and where they're positioned. But you also might be drawn to more inward experience of noticing thoughts that you see, thoughts that you hear in your mind, and also more inward feeling, emotional sensations in the body. And whatever you notice, whatever your attention's pulled to, do your best to just kind of find the right label for it. Is it see? Is it hear? Or is it feel? That means, is it an experience that I'm seeing or that I'm hearing or feeling? And then use that label as a kind of mental marker for that experience. And hear yourself think that word. If you're alone, you can even say the word out loud. And that's what the technique is, okay? Doing that again and again. It's very repetitive, much like certain exercises, for instance, are very repetitive. If you're lifting weights, you don't lift it one time and then put it down and go home. I mean, presumably at least, you continue to lift it again and again and again, and that's how strengthening occurs. If you take a walk or a jog, you don't take 3 steps, turn around and go back inside. You set a course for yourself. And what you're actually doing is making one foot move in front of the other, and that repetitive motion is the exercise. It's the same principle here. I actually really like to talk about and to describe and to coach people with this. If it's something that you still feel is really confusing or just you don't get it at all, feel free to email me or send me a text or something. We can decide a time. I can give you a call if you want. But follow the guidance in the video and rely on that a good bit if you can. The self-regulation skills, I've explained those in other places, so I'm not going to go over them again here. They're just all in one spot. So here, the last two slides are what I'm going to ask you to, this is kind of like the new stuff for this week. I'm considering this week an intensive. For what I mean by that is just a compact period of practice, okay? An intensive period of the skills of self-awareness. So the 4 things that I'll be asking you to complete and submit will include a daily 10-minute mindfulness practice, at least, I think I put, 3, at least 3 micro hits of mindfulness practice. That means that at any point, any time in the day, no matter what you're doing, the phrase "stop on a dime," you've ever heard that? It just means completely suspend all other activities and jump headfirst into the see, hear, feel practice. Okay, so I'm doing this video thing, part of my job, part of my schedule, and then I freeze, see, feel. And it's a little weird to just jump in and say it out loud. You don't have to do that. But a micro hit of practice is 100% of your attention in the see, hear, feel technique for any time ranging between 5 seconds, just maybe close to what I just did, to up to 5 minutes, 6 minutes, anything under 10 minutes, basically. Okay? So I'm going to ask that you do that at least 3 times a day. And I say at least because you can do it, you can pepper it in morning to night a whole bunch of times. Thirdly, I want you to choose 2 self-regulation techniques and use them on a daily basis. And you don't have to choose the same 2 for every day, but you can. If 2 of them if splashing cold water on your face calms you down, and if deep breathing or working with distorted thoughts or something like that just kind of fits, they stood out to you, then choose those 2 and hang with them. Or if you want to experiment with the different techniques, then try them out. But for a period of 7 days, I'd like for you to use 2 of them a day. And not just in a practice format, like I'm sitting by myself trying these things, but in daily life. You're in conflict with someone in a close relationship, so you feel really reactive and agitated. Maybe that would be a good time to, while you're talking with this person, incorporating a little bit of deep breathing. So breathing in deeply, maybe for the count of 5, breathing out deeply and fully, maybe for the count of 8 or something like that. Allowing that to be a formal thing that you try in order to help yourself feel more regulated. That's the purpose. So using at least 2 of those a day for this period of 7 days. And then a new thing that I'd like for you to try, but anytime in this 7-day period that you're going to go through, I'd like for you to complete 3 expressive narrative journaling exercises. So let me explain what that is. A journaling exercise is helpful. It can be just any type of journaling, writing what happened that day, describing a scenario that was hard or that was wonderful. And expressive journaling is emotionally focused. It's when you just let your feelings fall out on the page. That's often what people think of when they think of the word journaling. Just gonna, I'm gonna tell my diary about it or whatever. And that's great, that's helpful. Part of what makes this expressive narrative journaling different is that you're allowing your emotions to have space on the page, and you're describing a narrative story about what happened in your life during a certain day, a certain period of the day, a certain phase of your life, whatever. So there are 2 primary components, as I've kind of outlined on the slide about this. So what makes expressive narrative journaling what it is that there's emotionally focused content. So you're kind of choosing an event to journal about, or a time to journal about, or an occurrence or something. And you're focusing on your own emotional experience of that event. Okay? If you got in a wreck, for instance, you would use words like maybe fear or panic or worry or whatever, and make that emotionally focused language a part of how you're writing about it. And the second main component is that it should be in a coherent and organized format. That means it's a narrative format has at least the three components of a beginning, a middle, and an end. So describing the experience of a car wreck means, in a narrative fashion, means that you describe from the time you either were deciding to leave, got in the car, started the car, got on the interstate, or whatever, wherever the phase of the story began, and leading up to the kind of climactic middle part where all of the stuff happened, and then a resolution, conclusion, pause point where it doesn't have to be a happy ending either. It's just, okay, that happened, and then as a result of that, I went, I made these decisions. People were left in this state, stuff like that. State of mind, I mean, not state, as in the state in the country. But so the beginning, middle, and end is what makes a story, a narrative, a narrative. So that's what the expressive journaling, narrative journaling exercise is. There's an open line of communication for any clarification for that. And really specifically what I want you to submit is a practice log, including the dates, times, and I'm just reading off the PowerPoint here, of the 10-minute mindful awareness practice, when and how often you practice the micro hits. So remember, those are at least 3 times a day. And just list the dates and how many times you did it. And when and how you use the self-regulation techniques, which remember are 2 a day at least, and those are just listed the dates and the specific techniques that you use. And I'm not giving you a format to complete for a practice log.